need to edit the video afterwards. Welcome to the CTC CEC Readiness Awareness Call. Yeah, our two topics are, hi Ilya, nice to see you. Our two topics are two outcomes we're going for. So that you have a as good as possible understanding of what's expected from CTC/CEC candidates, and that Michael and I get some feedback from your perspective, how we can improve the application and review process, as we are both members of the program improvement team with the Scrum Alliance. And a basic thing to start with, I think, is a good is a question that Michael has in a questionnaire that he sends out to people who want to talk to him about the CTC application. And the first question is, what do you think is Agile coaching? Is anybody on the call ready to give a quick answer to that? And you need to unmute yourself if you want us to hear you.
So I'll jump in without any real prep. I think that Agile coaching, for me, off the top of my head, is to bring skills and disciplines of coaching into an environment so that we could build trust and be able to communicate what are the objectives in Agile within an Agile container. Like typically people say, hey, we need Agile or we need Scrum. Mm-hmm. And for me, as a coach, I'm often starting to ask questions about, okay, what is your goal? Not just to be Agile or get Agile or apply Agile, mm-hmm. in quotes, but what are the larger objectives? And once we could make it through that conversation and agree that applying Agile principles is potentially beneficial as an experiment, then to again coach them throughout the process to mm-hmm. get the understanding of what those principles are and how they might be best applied.
The two things I like about your definition, the first and most important one to me, and I'll ask Michael in a second what's most important to him, is I haven't heard it before. Burkhard raised his hand.
Yes.
Is that...
Okay. Huh? Sorry,
yeah?
I think from my side, it's even the difference between consulting and coaching is on consulting, I think customers... Sorry.
Wait a second. I just want to finish my comment on what Victor said, and then
okay, good.
I'll ask you. So the first thing I like is that it doesn't sound like something I've read in a book or heard before. And the second thing, it has a clear emphasis on coaching. Most applications that I get that don't make it to me reading all of them. The very first question in the CEC and the CTC application asks for your coaching journey. I'm not sure the exact wording, but they ask you, like, how did you become a coach? And I frequently get accounts where the word coaching doesn't even show up. So that most people talk a lot about Agile and not much about coaching. And that's important to understand. And to me, it's the most important misunderstanding that people have, that the CTC or CEC application is a place to show off all your Agile successes. It's not even a good place to show off your coaching successes, although that's a little better, but it's definitely more about coaching than about Agile. And it's about showing off your learning journey more than your successes. Okay, Burkhard, give us another perspective, and then I hand over to Michael to give you his view on what Agile.
And this, from my perspective, my perspective is more that even the difference to consulting or to deliver Agile or support teams in Agile is that I think the teams or even your customers are more expecting a solution if you consult. And I think to identify the starting point and to give teams a way and a vision and to help them to walk through this way, this is more the coaching part. So it's because it's their solution, it's not your solution. It's not a framework we give over and say, hey, it's because this you have to wait for daily of 50 minutes. If you think it's better to have a daily of 20 minutes, do 20 or whatever, or do not the daily, whatever. So it's their way. Yes, there's no solution. That is so. That's the idea from my side.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, so in the first response, what I like about the why Agile question is that there's a desire there to understand the system and what the system wants. And so there's this probing question of going for depth and very deep listening to the system, what's going on. And then what was just mentioned here, this distinction between consulting and coaching is a really important one for the application, and also I think just as an Agile coach. So we are doing these pre-qualification calls now, where we invite people before they start on the application to chat with us for about 30, 45 minutes. And one of the things that we do during that call often is we invite people to coach us for about 10 minutes. And the number one thing that happens there in terms of not so great things is that people start solving the problem. So like, today I said, I had one of these calls and I said, I'm going into this coaching engagement. It's a new one next Monday and I'm scared. And the other person immediately said, so when I go into a new coaching engagement, here's what I do. Right?
Yeah, lovely example. The coach me thing is the most interesting question in the application, in this pre-application call. Another good question is, what makes you interested in the certification? Somebody ready to give an answer to that question? Why would you want to be certified as a coach with the Scrum Alliance? And all of these questions have something in common. There is no right or wrong answer. Charles?
So I've met you, Olaf, at various Agile conferences. You are a great role model, and you have this calmness about you that just says you're this excellent servant leader. Why do I want to be following your footsteps and others is I feel this giving spirit to organizations, because the problems that organizations face today are not going to be solved using the techniques that we've come up with. Just like Michael was saying, the coaching aspect, when that person gives them that one answer, it is problem solving, and it is in the CTI speak, it's that level one listening. You're solving the problem. You're not listening to the system that is coming back. And so that is why, for me, it's the ultimate example of being a servant leader to a person, to a team, to an organization, to help them navigate these chaotic waters that we're all facing these days. That's my driving purpose.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely compliment. I would like to dig a little into that. I like that as a purpose driving you. How is it related to the certification?
It's a visual way in currently in society. It seems like everybody's tied up on certification aspects of it. And so, it's showing that continuous improvement in my life of, okay, start with the CSM, start with the CSPO, become a CSP. Okay. It's showing that continuous improvement. It's not a badge for me to wear to say I've got all the answers. On the contrary, it shows that I'm continually learning and I'm continually listening. And so that's the reason I'm pursuing it.
Thank you. Anybody different?
Yes, if I can say something more. I think it's,
sure.
As coach, I think to work agile in the company is much more than having an agile team, and it's much more having a method. It's a lot around. It's of, even if you have more than one team and you're coming in scaled environment, it's something about agreements, finding as a team. It's about sharing knowledge. It's a group of building up group of competences. It's even preparing and helping the customers to find solution around how to deploy easily whenever you want, continuous deployment, automated testing, all the things that comes up if you are starting HR with teams. But then the next step is to get even the next level of maturity. Yeah? And this is what I think an HR consultant differs from a coach, because the coach does know more about the system than this framework and one team. And even he shows the customer the chances and even the risk of this way he has to go as a vision. That's, I think, the difference between a coach and a consultant or a Scrum Master.
Mm-hmm. And how does that relate to you wanting the certification?
Yeah, it's one for me because I'm working here in Frankfurt in a bank as Scrum Master of a digital transformation team. And in this case, it is to, even for me, the certification is a quality thing, because I say, okay, I can differ between consulting and coaching. And it's even for me personally a challenge to get it, to know as a continuous improvement, even of my personal way and vision, to show, okay, I'm now able to coach the people and have an exchange with other coaches. I have a continuous improvement so that I become better for customers to go their HR way. That's the idea behind. And this is the brand for it at the end. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So, okay, I can do it. Yeah.
Great.
I'd like to add something. First of all, I like what both of the previous responses. I like a lot of what you had said. One thing for me, which is why I applied for both actually the CTC and the CEC, is a certain validation. And I say that because in this day and age of fake news or fake agile coaching, like what is an agile coach? Now I'm talking to my peers, to other people who are, I can say, yes, they're agile coaches, but what about me? And now I could kind of compare myself to you and open up a dialogue with you. And then I feel more accepted, and that gives me that confidence, knowing that I'm not just labeling myself a coach.
Thank you. I don't know if you get extra points when you make me laugh like that in your application, but it will not make you fail. Andrew?
I didn't say fake news in there.
And I think the certificate to a certain degree, kind of the same thing as Vic's talking about, is that it gives you a base understanding of when you're talking to someone that, oh, I didn't know you didn't know that, like a base understanding of this is a fundamental that we should all be aware of. You don't get surprised after a long discussion and realize, oh, we're talking about different things. So that's one of the values. But on the other hand, do I believe certification? Well, to certain degrees, because, a lot of times if you're looking for a new job, there's still company out there, they kind of see certification as tickets. That if you don't have it, I don't even want to talk to you. That's kind of another, realistic, out there. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Michael, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I had just a quick clarification question. Vic, which two certifications did you say you're applying for?
I put in part one just over the weekend for the Certified Enterprise Coach. And back in October, I passed part one of the Certified Teams Coach. Now I've got the uphill climb of doing both part twos.
Okay, so I wanted just to share with you a piece of information, which is, I think since the time you submitted all of those things, we've just recently changed the CEC so that there's now a small supplemental application, which is like 2 questions. And so if you get the CEC and you do these 2 questions, then you also get the CTC.
I was speaking with Roger Brown about a week ago, and he had alluded to something like that. So I meant to ask a follow-on question. Thank you, Michael. That sounds like great information.
Great.
Saving time as well.
Yeah. So, Olaf, I appreciate you saying that there's no right or wrong answer, because I think in my submission, I actually got this question wrong. So, so the reason I applied was, first, is I feel inadequate very often, and I wanted someone to tell me I'm adequate. And then the second reason was something like to make more money. And the reviewer actually pointed out to me that right now, where the coaching certifications are, it's exactly the opposite. The coaches have to invest in the certification rather than the other way around. And so I wanted to share that all with you. And I also wanted to use that to make the point that I view the application process as sort of a collaboration, right? It's not that you send in your application and then 3 months later you get a 1 or a 0. There's a sort of a conversation that takes place where, you know, we're both trying to figure this out, like what's really going on here. And so, you know, I got dozens of comments on my application, and I went back and forth with the reviewers. And we've tried to even expand that more to include more face-to-face.
And that's new, and we are driving that. Not all reviewers are doing that yet, but we are going to align that. So when I made my application, I think it was 2013, I sent in a Word document via email. There wasn't even Google Docs. Most of the reviews I've done until last year, I reviewed the Google Doc. I occasionally made a comment, but basically the two reviewers were talking at the end, and they would get together feedback and send an email to the applicant. And we started having feedback conversations early on. I now recommend to everybody, let me look at your application as you write it. That means I will not be the reviewer because I'm helping you fill it in, but I can guide you with a few comments early on and say, hey, this is good, more of that, less of that, and that's great. And looking at the answers you gave,
very helpful.
Ilya and I had a pre-call about a week ago.
Helped me a lot.
Thank you, and you're welcome. And what I'm taking from all of your answers is, A, you have put some thinking into it, and you are able to communicate your thinking to me. That's important for a coach. And the other thing is, in all of the answers, I sensed a learning journey. And that's one of the, I don't know, there are less than a handful really critical things that we're looking for in an application. And you being on a learning journey is one of them. So if you come out from what we read in the application as, this is what I've done, check, 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 these are all my successes, you're very unlikely to succeed. If you come with a few successes and with a lot of failures and with a lot of learning, and we, especially as the application process takes some time and we see progress and we see that things sink in and things change, that's brilliant. So if you use, especially these first questions in the part 1, I always read part 1 again when I get a part 2 application to review. And you set my expectation with the answers to the first questions. And if in the very first question, I guess, okay, he hasn't or she hasn't understood this is about coaching. She thinks it's about Agile. And then there are the goals. And the goals are, I wouldn't even be opposed to make more money and overcome my imposter syndrome. I would like to see a bit of background to that. And then when the coaching goals, when it asks for personal development goals, then you read something like, I want to speak at 10 conferences next year, and I want to do more executive coaching. And I'm like, okay, when I get the impression that you don't even read the instructions carefully, I'm very likely to be critical with your application. So be careful with, especially with those first answers, to spend a little time and ask people you know, ask people who have one of those certifications or just other coaches for feedback in those Google documents. That's really valuable. Charles?
Yes, I'd just like to build on what you and Michael have been talking about. From my perspective, I submitted my, well, back then it was called the CSC before it even changed the CEC, and my part 1 reviewers, one in particular, was very good about, okay, how's this going to apply in your work situation? How does this apply to you directly? And so I got put on hold for a 1-year period to go back and gain more expertise, more knowledge, and show that continuing improvement path. And then when I resubmitted it, past part 1, now I'm in that part 2 phase, and it's like I'm taking more time to answer those questions to really make sure, okay, I'm putting that presenting forth of, okay, here's some successes, here's some failures. Okay, let's see where this lands. So yeah, just giving that to everybody, definitely take the time to think through these questions.
Yeah, and initially getting them wrong is perfectly common. I remember Martin Kearns was mentoring me at the time, and I sent him my application. I was really proud because it was definitely the most effortful document that I had produced in my life. I have not finished my university studies, so I didn't do a master's thesis or something like that. So that was definitely the document where I thought, this is where I really put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and thinking into it. I was really proud of it. And he said, oh, Olaf, sorry, but it's not good enough yet. And I'm like, okay, let's start talking about which things do I need to improve? And he said, no, it's not good enough yet. There's none of it good enough yet. I was like, what? Like, yeah, we have the scoring thing and it's red on every question. And like, ugh.
Yeah.
And it took a while, and the learning journey was extraordinary, and it's not stopped. And that's the beautiful thing. It's you start getting into this, taking things in, questioning stuff, and building your awareness. I mentioned learning earlier, that we want to see a learning journey and a learning stance, and some humility in the application. The other thing is we want to know what's going on inside your head, to some extent. All of us use intuition a lot, and that's great. But in hindsight, you should be able to understand your intuition in a way like, oh, this is what I noticed, and this is how I interpreted what I noticed. And these were the options I saw, and I went with this one because, and then that happened. And I have a systemic understanding of what happened. I once had an application that was the first one where I tried this feedback thing, because I had an application from somebody I knew for years and I admired. He had been in the business before I started. And I read something and I thought, I must be reading this wrong. I must be missing something. So I sent him emails, and we sent 20 emails back and forth, and it didn't improve. And then it's like, let's talk on Skype. So we started talking on Skype, and I'm like, I need to know how you make decisions. And he said, I never make decisions. I'm a coach. And I'm like, interesting. So what do you do? So I only ask questions. How do you decide which question to ask? Blank. Yeah, no idea. He had never thought about that before. And obviously, you don't have a decision-making process for your questions. And again, intuition is your friend. Intuition is condensed experience. I heard from Dave Snowden. That was one of the most relieving statements I ever heard in a keynote. But yeah, we need to be able to make sense of it for 2 reasons. If you are not conscious of how you work, you can't improve it. And if you are not conscious of how you work, you can't tell anybody else how to do it. So you can't pass on your knowledge and your experience. And this is what we want you to be able to do. Michael, what's the next question we need to look at? Or do we go for a short coaching demo? Ask if someone is daring enough to coach one of us or one of the others?
Oh, that would be a lot of fun. I was just going to say that I call this last piece of what you talked about, I call that running your mind in debug mode.
Yes, lovely.
So yeah, coaching demo would be fantastic.
So is anybody up for being coached by one of the others? And is anybody up for running a 5 to 10 minute coaching demo?
I'll volunteer to be the coach.
Okay. Vic, you unmuted yourself. Do you want to be coached by Charles?
That sounds fine.
Awesome. I learned a new word last weekend. That's voluntold. I was voluntold to do something. I'm glad I didn't need to use that here. Okay. So go ahead. You have our attention, and you have 5 to 10 minutes.
Hello, Vic. What do you want to be coached on today? What's on your mind?
Well, Charles, I'm having this issue with working with one of my peers. You see, I'm the program manager, and I'm trying to work with the director of marketing, so that we can get this big program moving forward. I just feel like it's stuck right now.
Okay, and what would a successful implementation or resolution to this situation look like to you at this moment?
Well, the implementation is so far out, that's hard to put in words, but I feel like right now, for this specific situation, it's just real difficult to get this guy to kind of commit to what the strategy is. I feel like without that, we can't get any of our teams aligned and moving forward. It's just really painful.
I can feel that pain and everything. How's it showing up with your different teams, and yourself and your product owner?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if you're asking about how I'm feeling, I'm stressed because I feel like I'm being pulled from many different directions, with my boss and the general manager of the group always asking for updates. I'm being pulled from the development manager asking for, okay, what is it that we're trying to build here?
I've got this picture of Gumby. You're being pulled on all of your limbs here, and you're wondering when one's going to snap off. How about your teams? How's that impacting your teams?
So my team is a bunch of Scrum Masters, and their complaint is similar to mine, only on a smaller scale. Each of their Scrum teams is working, but it feels like the overall direction is changing, week to week, sometimes day to day. Just acceptance criteria isn't always there. We kind of feel like we know what the problem is, but again, I think it's this one person who's in charge of the POs who just kind of refuses to get a strategy on paper that we can all rally around.
Okay, so everybody's feeling like we know what the answer is. What I'm sensing is this chief product officer, for lack of a term, is really not listening to you and not feeling, the urgency and critical factor of this. Is that a fair summary there?
I think you nailed it, especially the not feeling the urgency.
Right. So tell me a little bit about what you've already tried with this person in terms of conversations and things like that. I just want to try to understand a few of the nuances you've tried already.
That's great. So this has been going on for a few months at least. As I told you, we're already in development. So what I've done in working with him is work one-on-one or in groups with the other managers, the development managers. So we're all peers, right? So we're trying to, whether it's one-on-one or in the smaller group, we're trying to just get him to kind of commit without changing the story so often. So what I've done in one-on-one is just tell him, hey, this is really urgent, and aren't you understanding, or like what's your understanding that the general manager is giving us that makes you think that you can keep changing the strategy? And I just feel like he he changes his story, he kind of laughs and changes his story all the time, like he's the only one who knows, and everyone should read his mind.
Do you have a sense of why he may be changing strategy? Do you think that it could be, external pressures on him, or just?
Yeah, I'm sure he's got external pressures. Agile is kind of new to us, so I'm not sure if he uses that necessarily as an excuse, but he always tends to say, well, this is how we've always done it, and I kind of feel like he's stuck in the past.
Yeah. When you said this is how we've always done that, it came to mind that he's really facing a lot of fear. He's been promoted to this position. Probably he's been there for several years. They're new to this. He's feeling that fear of, I'm having to change and change how I'm operating, and perhaps he's not feeling very comfortable. It's not what got him to this point, and now he's having to change how he's working. So what's some ways that you can help him reduce that fear?
Wow, that's good framing it like that, because now it feels like a more tangible exercise for me. I think making safe places, telling him that we can make changes along the way, but for right now we just need something certain. So maybe just giving him the assurance that we're all on his side.
Yeah. How'd that feel when you said that right then, that you're all on his side?
Well, it's the truth. Maybe he doesn't realize it. So I think that felt pretty good.
Okay. So you feel like you've got a better handle on this, or do we need to dive a little bit deeper in this? I'm here for you.
Well, I'm just wondering what my next step would be right now. Like when I leave my office to go talk to him, that's one good concrete thing I could do.
Yeah. That was kind of what I was feeling. That okay, what can Vic do next with this person to help show you are really there for them? You're really there to help them conquer this situation and things like that. So
yeah, I think like you said, working on identifying the fear, letting him know that we're aware of it and that we're on his side. Maybe I could just have lunch with him instead of scheduling a meeting where he's under pressure to talk. Maybe just have lunch and talk about baseball.
Yeah, take him out to lunch, pay for it, and just have a good, calm conversation during lunch. It's a neutral location. You can find out a little bit more about each other, and that builds that foundation of trust and things like that. So, so when are you going to do that? When are you going to do that?
I think I'm going to talk to him here now and see if he wants to grab lunch in the next couple of days.
All right.
So by Wednesday, I'd say if he's not free, if he can't find time for me this week, there might be another coaching call to follow up on.
All right. Well, I look forward to hearing, a positive report, and or looking forward to hearing from you again, and let's continue this conversation. Okay.
Thanks, Charles. Sounds good.
Thank you, Vic.
Thanks for your help.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for your courage and the spontaneous stepping up. The others, what did you observe? What did you notice?
Well, I like, actually, I enjoy the conversation a lot. I like when, the coaching offering, very positive and actually pinpoint to the major pain point that client or the other Scrum Master has. And then also trying to form the challenge into some kind of action that we can actually take down. And then, showing them, try to be on the other person's shoes, oh, I feel your pain, I understand how challenging the change management is all about. And then, offering some small wins to get, things moving into the right direction. Thank you.
Other observation, different observations?
No, I agree. I guess so. Charles, as coach, really started with open questions. So he gave the space for Vic as coachee to answer, to find the reason, the solution, to be able to see the point of view of the third person, yeah, and from his perspective. And I was really cool. He did not deliver any solution. He was always asking questions, yeah, so that Vic comes back with his own ideas. And I was really cool because at the end he started more or less like a contract, because he asked him for smart targets to say, okay, what is your next step? What will you do in the next days? And not so forcing. He is okay, good idea to have a lunch when the next day. So when will you do it? So on the smart way. That was really cool. Yeah, and even to close it with the condition to start and one more improvement meeting and coaching in future, so that you can continuously improve on both sides. Yeah? So it's really cool. Absolutely good stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed is that I got the strong impression multiple times that Charles has a model in his head of how the conversation is going to go, and that he's checking in with that model through the course of the conversation, and that gives him a frame. And that's another important point in the application, that we get a sense that you know what you're doing in terms of modeling it in your head, and seeing a bigger picture, seeing a frame of improvement, a frame of process, a frame of a coaching conversation. In the case of an enterprise coach application, we also want you to have a model of how you approach the organization as a whole, instead of just having points of contact with people or teams or roles. And these could be various kinds of models that don't need to be standard. We're not asking you to implement SAFe in the organization. You may do that if you have a good explanation for it, but the general expectation is that you don't just act on gut feel when you help an organization go through some change. You probably have a similar statement in different words, Michael.
Yeah, so I think that what really hit me is that there's, I think Charles mentioned that he's a coactive coach, or he's done some of the training. And so he
got the CPCC on February the 5th.
Congratulations. Okay.
Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I saw all sorts of things like, interruption, metaphor, powerful questions, all of these specific coaching skills that were very clear. I do have a question for you, if you're willing to answer it, Charles.
I'm willing. Go for it, Michael.
So there was at one point in the conversation, like 2/3 of the way through, where you had sort of like an invitation to tell a story, like, where is this external pressure coming from? And I'm wondering, do you remember that part?
I do remember that.
And can you say a little bit about what you were thinking with that? What you were?
I was thinking, okay, let me put myself over on that other side in some of my experiences of like, okay, wonder where this pressure might be coming from for that person. Might give me a little bit more understanding of where Vic was coming from. If I can step over onto that side, I might understand a little bit more of the perspective that Vic was bringing as well. Does that help? Oh, I don't hear you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'm looking at the I'm looking at the time. We have 20 minutes left. So I'm thinking let's spend about 5 more minutes on what you need to know to be successfully applying, and then have 15 minutes to either go for more questions or to ask for feedback on how to improve the application.
So I'd like to elaborate, if you don't mind, on what
Sure.
Michael, or maybe it was you, Olaf, about the dual certifications. So I started the CSC and it's now evolved into CEC. So there was something about the 2 questions on one of the applications. Is it on the CEC application, and has it been updated in Google Docs, or just how is that working?
Yes, so that's right. So on the CEC, the latest version, I think, has this supplementary page with like 2 extra questions. And if you answer those and quote unquote pass them, then and the CEC, then you get the CEC and the CTC.
Okay, all right. Because I've got a Google Doc application open for the CEC, and then I've got the Google Doc application open for the CTC. I started the CEC route since that was the one coaching certification that was available at the time, and then then Scrum Alliance split them into the 2. So.
Right. So do you see the supplementary piece in the CEC?
I haven't looked today, so I'll go back and look, and if not, I'll reach out to Veronica or somebody to say, hey, what if I've got both of these open, why am I not seeing the 2 extra questions on the CEC application?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Is there any formal advantage to having both?
What kind of formal?
I don't know. Is there, I know that with CEC, for example, I can be a trainer for the Certified Agile Leadership Program. Is there any requirements for any stuff that I need the CTC for where the CEC wouldn't qualify? Do you know?
Not as far as I know within the Scrum Alliance.
Yeah.
My assumption is that people who want to become CTC, for instance, want to mentor future team coaches. I've heard that as somebody wanted to have the accreditation so that they can guide others towards it. For me personally, it has worked well without it, but I understand the perspective. And another thing is, if you want to work with teams and you want to advertise in your certification list that you do that and want to do that, then CTC makes sense. That's me making it up right now. So,
okay, thanks.
Okay, the 2 topics, Michael, that I think we haven't really covered yet are mentoring and Agile community participation. Do you want to say a few words about requirements regarding those 2?
Yeah, so I'll talk about mentoring. And I'll say that I sort of personally have a pretty big charge around mentoring, which I have not cleared. So you're going to hear some of that emotion. So my thought here is something like, when I go into an organization and they say, who do you coach? I say, I would love to coach everyone. And so if I believe that a coach helps everyone potentially, then I should want that for myself as well. I should want coaching for myself. And so it really scares me when I see a candidate come in who doesn't have a mentor, doesn't have a coach. And when I ask a question, they'll say something like, I don't have time, or I don't have money. Because that's exactly what my clients say to me when I say, hi, are you interested in talking to a coach? And so I just wanted to share that all with you, right? The second thing that sort of scares me is that what we're looking for is some pretty deep relationship that has catalyzed growth. So it's rare to have that in a short calendar period of time, right? Like a week or a month or even 3 months. And so when someone discovers that this is a gap, it's not a simple gap to overcome. And sometimes there's like a lot of stress around that, right? Like, you know, I told my boss I was going to get this certification and now I'm not going to get the certification until next year. And so what I did for my certification is that I found someone who I thought was a person I admired and who could teach me a lot. And I set up sort of 1-hour coaching sessions several times a month for about 18 months. So that was like the structure of my mentoring relationship.
Another thing that's important, the mentor doesn't have to be a CEC or CGC. Technically, they don't even have to be a coach. But when they're not a coach, you need to do more explanation. So if you list your mom as a mentor, be specific in how she has helped you grow as a coach. If you list a CST as your mentor, similar things apply. Because we have made the experience that people who are not actively coaching sometimes do not really mentor in the way. So I'm just saying this very explicitly because it's a common case that people apply for CST and CEC at the same time, or they pursue both certifications at the same time, which is okay. And the CST requires a lot of co-training and mentoring, which is a totally different kind of mentoring from the mentoring we are looking for. It's both a long-term learning relationship, and that's where the similarity ends. So and this is probably a tip for all the things that you're kind of listing in your application. When you're listing your engagements, when you're listing your education bits, when you're listing books you've read, when you're listing your mentors or your mentees, be careful to write down what specifically have you learned there. I think it's the single best tip you can have to have a good application. If it matters a lot less what you've specifically done or achieved, then it matters for us to understand what you've learned while doing that. Is that a fair statement, Michael?
Yes, the application is not a resume.
Yeah. So if you had an application where actually nothing you ever done was successful, that would probably not be good. But it's actually not, it's a lot more important to understand what happened in your head than what happened in the organization you coached or with the people you coached. And the last topic is Agile community engagement. CTC, CEC, and CST are considered guide level certifications with the Scrum Alliance, which means that some level of international visibility is looked for. Doesn't mean you have to be traveling 5 continents and spoken keynotes at every conference, but if you've never had a talk at a conference that was outside of your own organization, go do that. If you've never organized a meetup, if you never visited another place to speak at a meetup or at a local gathering or conference or unconference, whatever, stir something up, do something pro bono, do something that shows that you are interested in increasing the visibility of what we do in the world. It doesn't need to be much. I've actually never seen an application fail because of that, but it's important to have some breadth there. And anything else that you want to know before we move towards what would you like to see improved, Andrew?
I have a quick question about the mentoring part that you just mentioned before this one. The coaching to me, is that because it sounds like you have to be with somebody long, or if you have a multiple people that helping through your career, and they probably stay with you, you have a very intense conversation for a short period of time, and you move on to the next one. You know, is that still considered a good coach or mentor to you in the application, or?
I think so. I'd like to hear Michael's perspective too. My perspective is, if I see that you have a consistent learning journey over many years and that multiple people have helped you along that way, and your journey is what makes it consistent, then that's perfectly fine. For most people, it doesn't work that way. the experience is that most people need somebody who stays with them for a longer time, has a long-term relationship, which builds over many months or even years. So if you're building that, go for at least one long-term relationship with a coach or with a mentor who can, and it's perfectly okay to talk a few times a year. If we see the growth over time, and if we see it's a qualifying relationship. If you have a history of learning of the past 5 to 10 years, and you have a larger number of people with shorter interventions, and you explain to us how these have given you the impulses to grow the way you did, it's probably going to work as well.
And then I just emphasize, right, that the coaching and the mentoring is about coaching itself. Right? So it's not about, say, advancing in one's career particularly. It's not about, say, coaching on a scaling framework. It's not about how to be a successful business person as an independent Agile coach and find clients. It's about coaching itself.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't hurt to list mentoring relationships of the other kinds as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And as we're talking about mentoring, it's probably worth mentioning that Michael and I are both running somehow regularly mentoring offerings for people, coaches in general, and people who apply for these programs in particular. So if you're interested in joining a group or having an individual relationship, contact us. And there are a few other people we know if you want different faces to work with, which is always a good thing to have many options. Okay, 7 minutes left. From your perspective, your experience so far as an applicant to these certifications, taking into account what we've already mentioned about changes that are happening, what would you like to have happen? What would you like to see improve? What did get on your nerves, irritated you? Andrew?
I would like to mention that in the very beginning that you mentioned this is the application process is more like a conversation instead of, I'm just going to stamp something on your application that you fail or you pass. I really like that part because, I'm pretty sure I don't know a lot of things. So, Yep, it's good to have a conversation to say, oh, yeah, this area you need improvement, so that I like that a lot. Thanks.
Thank you.
So having done both part one, CTC and the CEC, and I think I put the same comment in the ending question of each part one too. I don't think I would add any questions at this point, at least in part one. I'm not as familiar with part two or both of these. But in terms of the overall length, while I'm not trying to come off as someone who's complaining, it does feel very thorough, and I think that's a good thing. Again, it's easy for me as the lazy person who doesn't like filling out applications to kind of grumble and say, man, this takes a long time. But on the other hand, going back to what I said about that validation and opening a discussion with your peers, it gives me that chance to be very introspective. So I just kind of like coach myself to say, okay, just power through this, and you're going to become a better person in the end. But I'm just wondering if that might scare people away, even people who might otherwise be suitable for either one of these certifications. So again, not really a complaint. I don't know how I feel about it overall. It's not a binary answer.
Yeah, I've had conversations with people who said, why don't you do it in a conversation interview kind of style? And my take has been, which has also been the explanation to me by Martin Kearns and others when I applied, is as a guide level coach, as a person who is potentially writing proposals and writing something about the work to people in high positions at organizations who have a short attention span and low tolerance for bullshit. You need to be able to crisply articulate yourself and to make sense of what you do in a way that is compelling and that is showing the professional quality that we want to establish in this community. Somebody was mentioning the fake agile coaching at the very beginning. In the spirit of wanting to be at the opposite of that, I think requiring this ability to express yourself in writing is a good thing, and I would like to keep some of that, even if we move to more conversational things. And yes, I know people who have been scared away by that. So your point is absolutely valid, Vic. And we need to make sure as a community that we are inclusive enough that people we want to have in the community are able to make the entrance. Anything else?
What comes to my mind in that respect is that I found our conversation really helpful. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what would happen if the whole process wouldn't start with the document, but with the conversation.
And that's exactly the point. That's what we're changing now.
Oh,
so
right. Yeah.
Everybody who's applying for the application gets a checklist, and one bit on the checklist is call one of these guys and have a conversation like this. We've been modeling this kind of conversation in this call, so people know what to expect. And I think we covered about 8 out of the 10 questions that are on the checklist. And when I talked to you, I didn't even know the checklist existed, so that call was a little different. But yeah, that's exactly why we've made this change, to also establish this feedback cycle and say from the very beginning, let's treat this as a journey and not as a gate thing.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Michael, any closing thoughts? Anything we've missed?
I don't have any closing thoughts.
And that is a closing thought, right? It's a good checkout statement. Andrew?
So when will be the next session?
My next question would have been, is this something worth repeating, and when, if, at what frequency do you think? So I was overwhelmed that so many of you were here. Since I never got any response to my email to the list, I was expecting it's too much. Fearing I didn't have a problem with it. I would have had a nice conversation with Michael, sharing a lot of this content. It would have been a bit shorter and less interactive with candidates. But this was a lot better. So big thank you for all of you for showing up. And yeah, I'm guessing I will post the recording of this once it's done in an hour or two to the list and ask exactly this question. Track how many views the video has on YouTube, and then see how much people engage. And I'm thinking in a month or two, we could offer something like this again. And if by tomorrow 10 people say, hey, we want to call like this too, then sure, Michael and I will find an earlier date or find somebody in the group who does a similar call. Variety will be increasing the value. And if you're looking for mentoring, as we said, so both of our emails were on the invitation email. If you want to reach out for further support, I'm starting a mentoring group in a month or two with a few people who are already interested. Michael, do you still have your ongoing mentoring thing on every Saturday, or is that a thing that comes up again?
I do. I have a weekly group that meets on Saturday for an hour.
So there are multiple options. And when you go for online coaching on the Scrum Alliance website, there are multiple other things listed as well. So great. Burkhard, you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something?
Sorry. Yeah, when I take the chance, I want to thank you because I was struggling for a long, I think months, maybe 2 years, to start the application or not, and even to think about, okay, is it valuable or not? Yeah, is it even something for me? But now this chance to have this session now was really helpful for me. I will apply to the next day, and even if you bring up this mentorship, I will join, because even for me, it's the coolest thing on Agile is the exchange with others, I guess, because that is the spirit. Yeah, everything else is waterfall, yeah? Isn't it? Because you take something and do it. Yeah, but here you can exchange, you can learn from others' experience, and that's what's the coolest thing on it, I guess. Yeah, so I will be part of it. Yes.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much. And
thanks, everybody.
See you online or at some Scrum gathering or meetup or the like. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Scrum be with you.
Thank you. You're welcome.